I've always heard that surprises can backfire, but I thought that only applied to jumping out of closets or gifting someone the wrong perfume. Turns out, planning a surprise visit to your spouse can also end with a punchline so dark even a comedian would cringe. My wife, Olivia, was supposed to be at a boring conference, but when I decided to show up unannounced, I found myself unraveling a mystery that no amount of true crime podcast could have prepared me for. It started like any other business trip announcement. Olivia mentioned the marketing conference in Chicago a month in advance, detailing how she'd need to leave a day earlier than usual to get settled. It made sense. She's meticulous with her schedule, always preparing presentations down to the last bullet point. I was proud of her dedication. At the same time, I noticed something that struck me as peculiar. Normally, Olivia loved telling me all about the keynote speakers and breakout sessions, but this time, she was vague. Just another conference, she said when I asked who was speaking. I chalked it up to work stress and left it alone. In the days leading up to her trip, Olivia seemed preoccupied. She spent more time on her phone, stepping away when notifications popped up. When I teased her about becoming addicted to TikTok, she laughed it off but didn't show me her screen like she usually would. It felt different, but I convinced myself I was overthinking. After all, we've been married for 8 years. If you can't trust your spouse, what's the point? The morning she left, her goodbye lingered a little longer than usual. She hugged me tightly, kissed my cheek, and said, "I'll miss you." I remember thinking it was a sweet moment. Now, I wonder if it was more like the guilty kiss of someone trying to soothe their conscience. I didn't let the thought fester, though, because I had my own secret plan. A few days earlier, I decided to surprise her by flying to Chicago. The idea seemed romantic at the time, a spontaneous visit to show her I missed her just as much as she supposedly missed me. I booked my flight, found a cheap Airbnb near her hotel, and even planned to bring a bouquet of her favorite flowers. I wanted her to know that after all these years, I still paid attention to the little things. The morning of my flight, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was her unusual behavior, or maybe it was the itinerary she'd accidentally left on the counter. When I glanced at it, I noticed her return date was a full day later than the conference's official end. That wasn't like Olivia. She never extended work trips unless there was a mandatory dinner or networking event, which she would have mentioned. My stomach churned, but I reminded myself not to be paranoid. She deserved my trust. Landing in Chicago felt exciting, like I was about to star in a rom-com. I imagined her face lighting up when she opened her hotel door. I'd even rehearsed a line or two, something playful like, "Surprise." The conference wasn't the only thing scheduled this week. But when I called the hotel to confirm her room number, my little fantasy crumbled. The receptionist's words hit me like a truck. "I'm sorry, sir. There's no one by that name registered here." At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe I pronounced her last name wrong. It happens. I repeated the details, spelling everything out this time, but the answer didn't change. Olivia wasn't staying there. Panic crept in, but I forced myself to think logically. Maybe she'd switched hotels last minute and forgot to update me. I texted her something casual. "Hey, hope the conference is going well. Just curious, which hotel did you end up at?" No response. I waited an hour, then 2. By the 3rd hour, my unease turned into suspicion. I called her phone, and it went straight to voicemail. My romantic surprise was starting to feel more like an uninvited investigation. I sat in the Airbnb scrolling through her social media accounts, looking for clues. There weren't many updates, just a few generic posts about work, nothing personal or location-specific. I began to wonder if she'd blocked me from seeing certain things. That night, I hardly slept. My gut told me something wasn't right, but I still clung to the hope that there was a reasonable explanation. I'd find out soon enough. The next morning, I decided to retrace her steps. I went to the conference center listed on her itinerary, hoping to catch her between sessions. The lobby was buzzing with attendees, but Olivia was nowhere in sight. After an hour of aimless wandering, I approached the registration desk and asked if they could confirm her attendance. The woman at the desk smiled politely and checked her list. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, "but there's no one registered here under that name." That's when it hit me. Olivia wasn't at the conference. Whatever she was doing in Chicago, it wasn't work-related. Standing in the conference center lobby, I felt like the punchline of a very cruel joke. My wife wasn't here. She'd lied, and now I was stuck in a city miles away from home, piecing together a puzzle I never wanted to solve. But if Olivia thought I'd just let this slide, she clearly underestimated me. The first thing I did was double-check every detail. Maybe I'd made a mistake. Maybe there was some innocent explanation I hadn't considered. But after checking and rechecking the itinerary, her social media, and the messages we'd exchanged before her trip, the facts remained the same. Olivia had said she'd be here, and she wasn't. No amount of wishful thinking could make that less true. As I walked back to my Airbnb, I tried to calm myself. People lie for all sorts of reasons, right? Maybe this wasn't what it looked like. Maybe she was working remotely or had a personal emergency. But then why wouldn't she tell me? Why block my calls? And why did I feel like the world's biggest fool? Back in my room, I sat down with a notebook and started listing every possible lead. I was angry, yes, but I wasn't about to let my emotions cloud my judgment. If Olivia was lying about the conference, then where was she? And who, if anyone, was she with? One thought led to another, and soon I was on my laptop, diving into her digital life. I wasn't proud of it, but desperate times call for desperate measures. Her email was the first place I looked, but there was nothing suspicious there, just work memos and promotional junk. Then I logged into our shared phone account and started combing through the call logs. That's when I found it, a number she'd been texting and calling almost every day for the past month. It wasn't saved in her contacts, and it wasn't a number I recognized. My stomach churned as I stared at the screen, debating what to do. Part of me wanted to call the number right then and demand answers. But I held back. If Olivia was hiding something, I needed to be smarter than that. The next step was figuring out where this number led. A quick Google search told me it was a Chicago area code, but nothing more. Frustrated, I considered hiring a private investigator, but then another idea hit me. If she wasn't answering her phone, maybe I could track her location through the Find My Phone app we'd set up years ago. I opened the app, half expecting it to be disabled, but to my surprise, it wasn't. A small blue dot appeared on the map, pulsing steadily. My heart raced as I zoomed in, trying to figure out where she was. It wasn't the conference center. It wasn't even a hotel. It was a residential address on the outskirts of the city. I stared at the screen, my mind spinning. Why was Olivia at someone's house? Who lived there? And how long had this been going on? My initial shock turned to cold determination. If she was there, I needed to see it for myself. The next morning, I rented a car and drove to the address. The neighborhood was quiet, filled with neat little houses and manicured lawns. I parked a few streets away and walked the rest of the distance, my pulse pounding in my ears. When I reached the house, I stopped short. A car I didn't recognize was parked in the driveway, a sleek black sedan with a personalized license plate that read for LVRBOY. The irony was almost laughable. Loverboy? Really? Whoever this guy was, he didn't seem like the discreet type. I waited across the street, keeping a safe distance while I tried to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to storm up to the front door and demand answers. But I knew I needed proof, something concrete that Olivia couldn't deny. So I sat there, watching and waiting, hoping I'd get the confirmation I needed. And then it happened. The door opened, and Olivia stepped out. She wasn't wearing her usual conference attire. No blazer, no sensible heels. Instead, she looked relaxed, almost carefree, in jeans and a t-shirt. She walked over to the car and leaned against it, laughing at something the man beside her said. He was tall, well-dressed, and ridiculously smug, like he knew he'd won some kind of prize. I watched as they got into the car and drove away, my hands shaking with rage. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was real. Olivia was cheating on me, and she didn't even seem to care about hiding it. There's a strange kind of paralysis that comes with betrayal. You see the pieces of your life scatter before you, but instead of collecting them, you just sit there, stunned, watching the chaos unfold. That was me, parked across the street from the house, staring at the woman I thought I knew so well. Olivia had stepped out with him again, this time dressed casually but effortlessly, as though this wasn't a secret rendezvous, but just another part of her daily routine. They walked to his car, laughing at some private joke, and as they drove off, I knew I couldn't keep playing the passive observer. My initial shock was quickly transforming into something darker, an anger so sharp it made my hands shake. I didn't just want answers anymore. I wanted her to look me in the eyes and explain how she'd reduced 8 years of marriage to this. When they returned later that evening, I'd made my decision. No more waiting. I was going to confront her. I'd spent hours rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd keep my composure, how I'd avoid giving her the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. But as the moment drew closer, none of that seemed to matter. All I wanted was to force her to acknowledge what she'd done. From my car, I watched as they entered the house again. This time, the lights in the living room flickered on, casting warm, inviting shadows on the blinds. It was an intimacy that I hadn't seen from Olivia in months, and the realization gutted me. While I'd been lying awake at night wondering if I was doing enough for her, she'd been here, building a life with someone else. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to calm the storm raging inside me. It would have been so easy to march up to the door and demand an explanation, to shatter their cozy little world with the truth. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the fear of what I'd find, of hearing her say that she loved him, that I was nothing more than a footnote in her story now. Instead, I took out my phone and opened the camera. If I was going to confront her, I needed to have the evidence in hand. I snapped photos of the house, the car in the driveway, and the faint silhouettes moving behind the blinds. Each image felt like a nail in the coffin of our marriage. But as the minutes ticked by, my anger started to eclipse my fear. Why should I be the one sitting here, waiting for answers that might never come? Why should I tiptoe around their betrayal, as though I was the intruder in their story? I couldn't take it anymore. I opened the car door, the cool night air hitting me like a wake-up call. My heart pounded in my chest as I crossed the street, each step heavy with the weight of what I was about to do. By the time I reached the driveway, I could hear muffled laughter from inside. It wasn't just the sound of two people enjoying themselves. It was the sound of someone else living the life I thought was mine. I raised my fist to knock, but froze. This was it, the moment that would change everything. There'd be no going back once that door opened. No one hearing whatever excuses or confessions she threw my way. For a brief second, I hesitated. Then I clenched my jaw, ready to shatter the facade she'd so carefully constructed. I didn't just knock on the door. I pounded on it, my fist landing with the kind of force that demanded attention. Inside, I could hear the laughter abruptly stop, replaced by muffled voices. My adrenaline was surging, and I was seconds away from breaking the door down myself when it finally opened. There she was, Olivia, her face a mask of confusion and something else, fear. She stepped out onto the porch, closing the door slightly behind her, as if to block my view of the man I knew was still inside. Her attempt at control only fueled my rage. "What the hell is this, Olivia?" My voice was loud, sharp, and unrecognizable even to myself. Her lips moved, but no sound came out at first. When she finally spoke, it was some weak excuse about me being in Chicago unannounced, as if I were the one who owed her an explanation. I wasn't having it. "Don't you dare turn this on me," I spat, pointing toward the house. "Who's in there? Your coworker? Your conference partner? Or is he just the guy who's been sharing the bed I thought was mine?" Her face turned pale, and for a second, I thought she might faint. But before she could reply, the man in question appeared behind her, standing tall and defiant in the doorway. He was everything I wasn't, polished, smug, and far too comfortable in a situation he had no right to be part of. "Look, man," he started, his tone condescending. "I think you need to calm down." That was it. Those 5 words sent me over the edge. I shoved past Olivia and squared up to him, my chest heaving. "Calm down?" I growled. "You think I'm going to calm down while you sit here playing house with my wife?" He smirked, and that smug expression almost earned him a broken nose. But Olivia stepped between us, her hands on my chest, trying to push me back. "Stop it, Liam," she screamed, her voice breaking. "You're making a scene." "A scene?" I shouted, my voice echoing in the quiet neighborhood. "This isn't a scene, Olivia. This is the fallout of you tearing our marriage apart." Neighbors were starting to peek out of their windows, drawn by the commotion. I didn't care. Let them watch. Let them see the mess she'd made of our lives. Olivia pleaded with me to leave, but I wasn't going anywhere. Not until I got answers. How long? You demanded, glaring at her. How long have you been sneaking around behind my back? She stammered, tears welling in her eyes, but I didn't let up. Was it weeks? Months? Years? When exactly did you decide that I wasn't enough? The man tried to step in again, muttering something about calling the police if I didn't leave. That's when I snapped. My fist shot out, narrowly missing his face as Olivia screamed. He stumbled back, finally realizing that I wasn't bluffing. I'm not leaving until I hear the truth, I growled. So either you both start talking, or I'll drag the truth out myself. Finally, Olivia broke. She admitted it had been going on for months. Business trips, late nights, all the cliches I never thought I'd fall for. She said she didn't mean for it to happen, that it was complicated, but her words were drowned out by the roaring in my ears. Every excuse she made felt like another betrayal. By the time I stormed out of that house, my hands were trembling, and my throat was raw from yelling. The neighbors had come outside now, watching from their porches as I walked back to my car. I didn't care. Let them talk. Let Olivia explain to them why her husband had just erupted like a volcano on their quiet suburban street. As I drove away, I realized something chilling. I wasn't just angry at Olivia. I was angry at myself for trusting her, for not seeing the signs, for letting her turn me into the fool I'd just become. The drive back to my Airbnb was a blur, my mind oscillating between rage and devastation. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly I thought it might snap. Her words, weak, hollow excuses, echoed in my head like a cruel refrain. Months. It had been months. While I worked late to build a life for us, she'd been unraveling it with someone else, one deceitful thread at a time. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with him. The laughter, the touch of her hand on his arm, the ease with which they existed together. It was like watching a stranger live my life. One I'd poured everything into, only to have it stolen and twisted into this grotesque mockery. By morning, the anger had reached a fever pitch. I wasn't just furious at her. I was furious at myself for walking away. It felt unfinished, like I'd let her off too easily. So I made a decision. If she thought she could hide behind her lies, she was wrong. I'd confront her again, this time on my terms. She'd face the full force of what she'd done, and there would be no escaping it. I drove back to the house, parking a block away to avoid alerting them. The morning was quiet, the kind of peaceful suburban silence that made the chaos inside me feel even louder. As I approached the house, I saw her car still in the driveway. Good. She hadn't fled yet. When I reached the door, I didn't knock. I barged in, the sound of the door slamming against the wall reverberating through the house. Olivia appeared almost immediately, her face a mixture of shock and fear. "Liam, what the hell are you doing?" she demanded, her voice shrill. "What am I doing?" I barked, my voice raw with anger. "I'm making sure you don't get to rewrite this story to make yourself the victim." "Where is he? Is he hiding upstairs like the coward he is?" Her lover emerged from the kitchen, his posture stiff, as if bracing for impact. "You need to leave," he said, trying to sound authoritative, but his voice lacked conviction. I stepped toward him, my fists clenched at my sides. "Or what? You'll call the cops? Go ahead. Let's explain to them why I'm here, because you decided to screw a married woman." Olivia stepped between us again, her hands outstretched. "Liam, stop. This isn't helping anyone." "Helping?" I laughed bitterly. "You think I'm here to help?" "No, Olivia. I'm here to make sure you understand exactly what you've done. You didn't just cheat on me. You destroyed everything we built together." "For what?" "You pointed at her, my disgust palpable." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. I wasn't here to soothe her guilt. "You lied to me, Olivia. For months, you let me believe we were okay while you were playing house with him. How do you even justify that to yourself?" "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice trembling. "It just got out of control." "Out of control?" I repeated, my voice rising. "That's what you call this? You didn't fall into his bed, Olivia. You chose this. Every lie you told, every excuse you made, it was a choice. And now you want to stand there and cry like you're the victim? No, you don't get to play that card. Her lover finally spoke up, his tone defensive. Look, man, I get that you're upset, but this isn't all on her. That was the wrong thing to say. Before I even realized what I was doing, I lunged at him, grabbing him by the collar. You don't get to lecture me about who's responsible. I roared. You knew she was married, and you didn't care. So don't act like you're some innocent bystander in all of this. He struggled against my grip, but I wasn't letting go. It wasn't until Olivia screamed that I released him, shoving him back against the wall. You're both pathetic, I said, my voice trembling with rage. The silence that followed was deafening. Olivia looked at me with wide, tear-filled eyes, but I refused to let her see the pain beneath my anger. You've made your choice, I said, my voice cold. Now you can live with it. But don't expect me to make this easy for you. Without another word, I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. The weight of what had just happened settled over me as I got into my car and drove away. But this time, I didn't feel defeated. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Leaving that house, I felt like a volcano ready to erupt. But this time my rage had focus. I wasn't going to let this end with me walking away like the defeated party. No, Olivia and her lover were about to understand the cost of betrayal. Back at the Airbnb, I began to execute my plan. The evidence I'd gathered, photos, timestamps, and detailed notes, was all there, waiting to be put to use. Olivia might have thought she was clever, living this double life, but she'd underestimated just how meticulous I could be when pushed. I wasn't going to fight for her, but I would make sure she faced the full consequences of her actions. The first step was financial. Our joint accounts? Frozen. Her credit cards? Canceled. I'd been the primary earner in our marriage, and while I'd never held that over her, it was time to reclaim control. By the end of the day, she'd be unable to swipe her way out of guilt. Next came the house. While she played her games in Chicago, I contacted a locksmith and changed the locks on her home. Her belongings? I carefully packed them into boxes and stacked them neatly in the garage. When she returned, she'd find a note taped to the front door. You're not welcome here anymore. Pick up your things by the end of the week. But the piece de resistance was the letter I drafted and sent to her employer. I kept it factual, attaching photos of Olivia and her lover cozying up during what was supposed to be a work trip. I didn't embellish or include my emotions. I let the evidence speak for itself. In her line of work, reputation mattered, and I knew this would be a blow she wouldn't recover from easily. Finally, I turned my attention to her lover. Through some light online sleuthing, I discovered he was married too. A quick call to his wife revealed she'd had no idea what was going on. Her shock quickly turned to fury, and I sent her everything I had, photos, dates, and even the address of the house where their little rendezvous had taken place. She thanked me, her voice trembling with emotion, and promised she'd handle it from there. It felt good knowing Olivia wasn't the only one whose life was about to be upended. By the time Olivia called me, likely after realizing her cards didn't work and her keys no longer fit the locks, I was ready. Her name lit up my phone screen, and I let it ring a few times before answering, my voice calm and steady. What do you want? I asked, as if we were nothing more than strangers. Her voice cracked with panic. Liam, what's going on? Why are my accounts frozen? Why can't I get into the house? I didn't hold back. Because, Olivia, you made your choice. You wanted him? Fine. But don't expect me to stand by and make your life easy while you destroy mine. She tried to apologize, to explain, but I cut her off. Save it. You can pick up your things and deal with the fallout on your own. We're done. And with that, I hung up. Over the next few weeks, the ripple effects of my actions played out exactly as I'd hoped. Olivia's lover's wife filed for divorce, taking him to the cleaners in the process. Olivia, now the subject of workplace gossip, quietly left her job, likely too humiliated to face her colleagues. As for me, I filed for divorce and made sure it was on my terms. The day I signed the final papers, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: freedom. Olivia's betrayal had shattered me, yes, but it also gave me the clarity to see how far I'd let myself drift from the man I used to be. Now I was rebuilding not just my life, but myself. In the end, Olivia got exactly what she deserved, and I got something even better, a fresh start, unburdened by her lies. They say living well is the best revenge, and for the first time in months, I knew that was exactly what I was going to do.